Hello everyone, today I want to talk about the MYP certificate because I see a lot of people asking about it online. I've had a lot of people contact me asking about the MYP certificate, and there seems to be a lot of uncertainty out there about what the MYP certificate is, how students can receive an MYP certificate, and I think a lot of that's to do with it not being widely adopted by a lot of schools. Even world schools who do all three programs, some of them don't choose not to do the MYP certificate. Other schools skip the MYP altogether and do another qualification like the GCSEs and then into diploma. So the idea here is to talk about the certificate, the requirements of the certificate, and some of my personal thoughts about the certificate and why I think it's a good idea. So the certificate, this is, mostly what the IB says is that it indicates successful completion of the MYP program requirements. Now, as I said, this isn't something that's compulsory from the IB. They don't make an MYP or an IB school do the certificate. But you do get from the IB, after the successful completion of the exams, a certificate indicating successful completion. And that can matter to some students in some schools. It is a broad and balanced program of study. As you'll see, it doesn't allow students to focus too heavily in one area. It's very similar to the diploma in that way, where the students still must do a broad range of subjects in order to qualify, unlike what are other qualifications, as I mentioned, such as the GCSE, which does allow for, the beginning of specialization and the students focusing on their strengths. It is IB validated. It's not an internal assessment. It is externally graded or moderated, depending on the specific exam, whether it's the e-assessment or the e-portfolio, which brings me to the next point of on-screen examinations. So the real innovative part of the certificate is that the majority of the exams are on-screen examinations, which are called e-assessments by the IB, which, having done it now for a few cycles of May exams, I can see it being the future of examinations. I think the IB e-assessment is a good model that probably we'll see one day in the diploma level as well. Then the other aspect of this is the e-portfolio, which is also externally graded. So, but it's not an exam necessarily. It's the submission of coursework. The main thing that the IB really highlights when you start doing the certificate and the e-assessments is that they want it to be skill-based rather than content-driven. I've mentioned GCSEs multiple times already, and that's for a reason. There can be a real direct comparison between these two. They happen at the same year group. It would be British Year 11, MYP 5, or American Grade 10. And so there is a direct comparison there. The difference, though, is that a GCSE traditionally is very content-driven. So in the English National Curriculum or the international equivalent, so the Cambridge curriculum, the content is specified. As a teacher of that curriculum, you'll receive quite an exhaustive list of things that must be covered in advance of the exam. For the MYP, there is no such exhaustive list of topics that must be covered. Instead, you're given broad themes that the students must have covered. So by the design of the program, the exam could never be content-driven. So instead, it's a skills-based exam where the students are given prompts, materials, or must draw on their existing knowledge to answer the questions given in the exam. So you could technically go into the exam and not know the exact topic that's going to be discussed, but you're given enough information within the exam that you can use your skills that you've learned to answer the questions. This brings us to the completion requirements. Now, this takes a little bit of explaining because it's, a bit more complicated than, again, a GCSE where you just register for the exams and sit the exams and off you go. There's a few different elements here at play. And this actually very recently changed. We'll get to that in a second. You must do eight assessments in total. And you can see 9 things on the screen, and we'll also get to that. The first 6 here, so language and literature, individuals and societies, sciences, mathematics, interdisciplinary, and language acquisition, are on-screen examinations, the e-assessments. The language acquisition is a recent addition to that list. So it never used to be there. It used to be an e-portfolio, but that's recently transitioned into an on-screen examination. And at the time of filming this, it's going to be the first cycle of those examinations happening. So it'd be very interesting to see what happens. Within so the students must take an e-assessment from each of those categories in order to qualify. In those categories, there are multiple options. The language and literature, you can do either the English certificate or the multilingual certificate. For the multilingual certificate, the students would take 2 language and literatures in place of the language acquisition, and that would be the multilingual diploma. For a regular English certificate, they would do English language and literature, and that would be actually the only choice for that option if you wanted to qualify for the certificate. In individuals and societies block, you have integrated humanities, history or geography that you can choose from, depending on what the school offers. The sciences, you've got the standard chemistry, biology, physics. Mathematics, there's standard and extended. Interdisciplinary is a single option. This is an interesting one. This essentially tests the students' ability to transfer their skills across subjects and combine knowledge between subjects. It was one of the core aims of the program. What happens is that in advance of the exams, the theme of the exam is released. They will say the combination for that interdisciplinary exam. For example, math and English. They'll give out a pack of pre-release material. It's a booklet somewhere between 10 to 15 pages of diagrams, graphs, pictures, text excerpts, things like that, that the students can use to prepare for that interdisciplinary exam. And this is meant really to kind of confirm that interdisciplinary study has been happening throughout the MYP program. Then, and language acquisition, of course, you've got the French online examination, I believe Spanish, a few other languages are available for that. I'm personally not an expert in the language acquisition field, and it is so new. We just have to wait and see how many options they have. Then we have the e-portfolio. This is the 7th assessment that must be undertaken. All right. So you have the choice of PHE, art, so that can be visual art or performing arts, or sorry, not performing arts, but rather music or drama, and design. So you would choose one of those and you would submit an e-portfolio. This one also, works in an interesting fashion. The IB releases what are called partially completed unit planners. And that's usually for the May examinations, like we take at my school, that would be released at November, December. You would give that partially completed planner to the subject teacher, who would modify the plan based on our context and then deliver that unit of study to the students. The summative tasks that they complete in that unit of study would then be compiled into a portfolio. There's some restrictions on the size of the portfolio depending on the subject, and it can be a combination of written and video. So the PHE portfolio is 15 pages rather, and 3 minutes of video as the maximum. The arts portfolio is quite a bit larger. I believe it's somewhere around 30 pages, but that scales down then if you include video. And the design portfolio is also somewhere around that limit as well. But all those values are published in the IB documentation. The personal project is something that actually the majority of MYP schools do already do. And so that's probably the most familiar thing here. This makes up part of the certificate. So it's the 8th assessment, essentially. And this is done through external moderation. So your cohort will complete the personal project. The supervisors will award a grade based on their grading of the project and the report. Then, depending on the size of the cohort, students are selected for moderation out of that cohort. And the grades that the school has awarded can be adjusted based on the moderated grades of the samples. As I said, though, that's a process that most coordinators are already familiar with, because most schools, even if they don't do the certificate, are doing the personal project already. Then the 9th one, and this isn't counted in the 8 assessments because it's not given a grade. So very similar to CAS in diploma, for the MYP certificate, we have services action. And this is simply within IBIS, the coordinator or the responsible member of staff would indicate complete or not complete, meaning the student has met the school's requirements for services action or has not completed. There's, as far as I'm aware, no moderation of that, or it's very rare if it happens. Although when you come up for your 5-year review, it's important that you have evidence of that services action completion. That's the time when they can audit, your programs such as CAS and services action. And you definitely don't want to be put in the position where your integrity is called out for, passing students on services action who have no evidence for that completion. It's really important to keep those records for that time, just in case, someone needs to see that evidence. So that's what, adds up to the final score. Now, these are each graded, except for the services action, on the typical IB scale of 1 to 7, giving a total score of the certificate out of 56. The minimum passing grade is 28, which would mean a 3 in every subject except for 1, where you would need to get at least a 4, and that would get you a 28. The global average from last year was, I believe, 40, or very close to 40. So, a score north of that would be seen as quite respectable. I can get into the nuts and bolts of doing the certificate and running the certificate another time. I think it's better to stay with the general outline of the program for now, and to finish with some of my thoughts. The way that I like to explain this to parents and to students is kind of like a pre-diploma qualification, a mini diploma, if you will. And anyone who's familiar with the diploma structure will already see those similarities between the programs. The fact that it's a broad qualification, you must take subjects from each category, really, aligns well with diploma. Even more than that, though, I've noticed as a teacher of both MYP and diploma that the emphasis on the command terms is quite big in the e-assessments and also the e-portfolios. And having this secure knowledge of the command terms, how to respond to questions that contain command terms, is a really valuable skill for the students to carry forward into the diploma. And so I see it as very valuable for that, because it is possible for a student to get through the MYP without that secure knowledge of command terms. A lot of schools aren't really leaning heavily into those and hammering them home to the students as much as maybe they should. I think more than the preparation for the DP, though, it provides a clear endpoint and, I think much needed structure to the MYP program. For the students, year MYP 5, or year 11 in the British system, grade 10, I feel it can fall a bit flat unless there's really that, final point, that marker, that point of success that we can reference. And so I see it as a great way to put them under a little bit of a healthy level of stress, get the students kind of engaged, motivated, really pushing themselves and showing what they're made of in like a very rigorous way. It's externally moderated. There's really no arguing with the results that come out of this process because it has gone through quite a rigorous process of moderation. And it has, and there is, some research by the IB that does a direct comparison, which is quite interesting and maybe the topic for a future video. But there's some kind of direct equivalency to other well-known qualifications like the GCSE and IGCSE, which, they've been around for a long time. They're quite well respected. People understand what the scores from those mean. And the e-assessments and the certificate have not been around for long enough to establish that reputation yet, but I can see it attaining that same level of reputation as time progresses, as we get through maybe the 10, 20-year mark of the MYP certificate. The final thing that we really use it for is assessing suitability for diploma studies. Now, we're not a selective school. If a student, one of our students is determined to continue on to the diploma, regardless of their scores, we're going to do our best for that student. But really, the scores of the certificate help us to establish which subjects maybe they should be choosing. If you do a chemistry exam for the certificate and you did not do particularly well, maybe you got a 3 or a 4, going and then choosing higher level chemistry for diploma would not be the smartest choice. And these numbers that we receive from the MYP certificate, these scores, these externally moderated scores, they're a great starting point for a conversation with the student, with the parents, about what's best for them in the diploma. And, if it was a school-based grade, there's the potential for, tough questions being asked, or, the rigor of the school-based assessments being questioned. But with these externally moderated results, it eliminates a lot of that uncertainty and gives a very clear indication of the student's level and suitability for diploma studies in the same field. I think we'll leave it there for now. There's a lot more that could be said about the e-assessments, the nuts and bolts of implementation and how to run them and subject choices and all of that. But we'll leave that for another time if there's interest in that. Thank you for listening. If you've got your own thoughts about the MYP certificate, if you do things a different way, have questions, put them down in the comments below, and I'll get back to you.